When director Leora Keane, the visionary force behind the ambitious reinterpretation Wicked, for Good, stepped onto the soundstage for the first table read, she was already carrying a bold, almost provocative thesis in her mind. Elphaba is not just a misunderstood misfit, she is a spiritual archetype. And when Cynthia Erivo delivered her first reading of The Wizard and I, Keane turned to her producers and said the line that would later ignite headlines everywhere. If you look closely enough, Elphaba could be seen as Jesus. The room froze. The cast didn't breathe, and Cynthia Erivo, humble and centered, simply placed a hand to her chest and whispered, I understand. Chapter 1. The Controversy of a Comparison. At first glance, the comparison feels daring, almost sacrilegious. How could the green-skinned outcast of Oz be likened to one of the most revered spiritual figures in human history? Keane anticipated the pushback. She knew fans would argue. Elphaba is flawed. She lashes out in anger. She breaks rules, challenges authority, and defies a system she believes is corrupt. She's rebellious, misunderstood, and feared. But, Keane insists, that is precisely the point. Her argument isn't about divinity, it's about the archetype of the persecuted truth-teller, the eternal pattern of a figure who challenges an unjust order, takes on the suffering of others, and is ultimately betrayed by the very institutions claiming to stand for peace, goodness, and justice. Jesus wasn't loved by the establishment, Keane says. He threatened the powerful, he saw the unseen, he defended the voiceless, he refused to play by their rules. And what did they do? They called him dangerous. And in the world of Oz, with its glittering illusions, unfair hierarchies, and tyrannical wizard who weaponize propaganda, Elphaba becomes a radical moral mirror. Chapter 2. Cynthia Erivo, The Transformation of a Lifetime. There are performances that feel extraordinary, and then there are performances that feel ordained. Cynthia Erivo's Elphaba, according to the cast and crew, belongs to the latter. From the moment she stepped into the signature black hat, everything about her transformation felt less like acting and more like embodiment. Even her co-star, who plays Glinda, openly confessed. Cynthia doesn't play Elphaba, she channels her. Erivo approached every rehearsal with ritualistic focus. She kept a journal titled, For the Misunderstood, in which she wrote from Elphaba's perspective, pages of emotion, anger, longing, and hope. She spent hours working through the psychology of isolation, asking herself questions like, what does it feel like to be stared at before you speak? What does it feel like to want to love but fear you'll ruin everything you touch? What does it feel like to sacrifice your own happiness to save a world that hates you? She was building Elphaba from the inside out, not as a character, but as a soul. Keane recalls the moment she realized Erivo was creating something sacred. In rehearsal for Defying Gravity, Cynthia lifted her hands and everything went silent. It was a spiritual moment. I knew then that Elphaba wasn't just a role. She was a symbol. Chapter 3. The Spiritual Blueprint of a Green-Skinned Prophet. To understand why Keane draws the Jesus parallel, we need to explore a foundational truth of literature and myth. The misunderstood prophetic outsider is a universal archetype. Think of them: Joan of Arc, Prometheus, Buddha, Moses, Socrates, MLK, and yes, Jesus. They are often born different, silenced or ridiculed, persecuted by authority, betrayed, sacrificed for a greater good, remembered as symbols of hope. Elphaba checks every box. Born different, her green skin marks her as other from birth. Silenced, her opinions are dismissed, her truth distorted, her intentions questioned. Persecuted, the wizard weaponize propaganda, turning the public against her. Betrayed, those she helps often become those who condemn her. Sacrificed, she chooses moral courage over public approval, knowing it will cost her everything. Reborn, her death becomes a resurrection, a symbolic rebirth into freedom. Keane emphasizes, I am not saying Elphaba is Jesus. I am saying she stands in the lineage of those who suffer for bearing the truth. Chapter 4. The Politics of Oz, a Parable of Power. One of the boldest thematic decisions in Wicked, for Good is the way Keane highlights the political structure of Oz. She treats it not as a whimsical fairy tale land, but as a fully functioning propaganda machine. In her interpretation, the wizard is a charismatic authoritarian figure. His administration manipulates the media, the Ozians. Histories are rewritten in real time. Public enemies are fabricated. Citizens are pacified through pageantry, fear, and performance. Sound familiar? Keane wanted audiences to see that Elphaba's rebellion isn't about magic, it's about justice. She witnesses the wizard stripping animals of their right to speak. She sees how fear is manufactured. She recognizes the lie behind the illusion. And she refuses to stay silent. Keene states, anytime someone challenges a corrupt system, they are labeled wicked. History has done this to prophets, truth-tellers, and activists for thousands of years. Chapter 5. Why Audiences Connect, the Deeply Human Core. For many fans, Elphaba isn't just a character. She is a mirror. Her story resonates because almost everyone knows what it feels like to be misunderstood, underestimated, judged wrongly, isolated, rejected, unseen. But the deeper connection lies in something else. The desire to be good even when the world insists you're not. Erivo explains it beautifully. Elphaba wants the same thing every human wants: to be loved, to be valued, to be seen as good. The tragedy is that no matter what she does, people fear her. So she decides to be good anyway. This is where the spiritual symbolism becomes most powerful. Elphaba chooses moral integrity over public approval. She chooses compassion over convenience. She chooses truth over comfort, even when it costs her everything. Chapter 6. The Love Story with Fiyero, a Sacred Intersection. At the heart of Wicked lies a love story, not one of glitter and perfection, but one of transformation. Fiyero doesn't save Elphaba, he sees her, and that is the salvation she'd been denied her entire life. Keene says, there is something deeply spiritual about being seen without conditions. Fiyero's love mirrors the kind of acceptance spiritual leaders preach. Unconditional, sacrificial, transformative, and in a poetic twist, he becomes the one who sacrifices everything to protect her, reversing the expected narrative. Where the world says Elphaba is dangerous, Fiyero sees truth. Where the world sees a monster, he sees a martyr. Chapter 7. The Fall, and the Resurrection. Every great myth has a fall. Every martyr story has a moment where the world's cruelty becomes unbearable. For Elphaba, that moment arrives when the wizard orchestrates the ultimate betrayal, turning her into a symbol of fear so powerful that even her closest allies hesitate to defend her. Keene wanted this sequence to feel almost biblical. Crowds chanting, authorities circling, the public hungry for a sacrifice. Lies swirling like scripture rewritten in real time. And then, the melting, the moment Oz believes the Wicked Witch is gone forever. But Keene intentionally frames it as a resurrection, not an ending. Elphaba escapes into a hidden life, free at last from the expectations of a world that never deserved her. Her disappearance, Keene says, isn't a defeat, it's an ascension. Chapter 8. Why this interpretation matters now. In an era overwhelmed by misinformation, political division, and public scapegoating, Wicked, for Good arrives with a message that feels almost prophetic. Be careful who you call wicked. Too often, society vilifies the ones who challenge injustice, the ones who speak too loudly, the ones who refuse to obey harmful systems. Elphaba's story reminds us that goodness isn't always glamorous. Truth doesn't always look like we expect. Heroes are often painted as villains before history redeems them. Keene believes this is why audiences are ready for a deeper, spiritually layered Elphaba. We live in a time when the truth-tellers are silenced and the loudest voices in the room aren't always the wisest. Elphaba teaches us that goodness can be fierce, fiery, defiant. And sometimes, the only way to do good is to stand alone. Conclusion. The Green Saint of Oz. So why does the director say Cynthia Erivo's Elphaba could be seen as Jesus? Not because she is divine. Not because she is religious. But because she embodies the timeless story of the persecuted visionary. A figure who speaks truth, suffers for it, is misunderstood, is betrayed, is condemned, and finally, transcends. Keene summarizes it best. Elphaba is a symbol of radical love in a world terrified of difference. And in Cynthia Erivo's hands, that symbol becomes breathtakingly alive, painful, powerful, deeply human, and undeniably transcendent.